Imagine standing in the barren desert of the Arabian Peninsula in the 6th century. Sand stretches endlessly, punctuated by small oases and nomadic tribes. If someone told you that this land, with no cities comparable to Rome or Constantinople, would one day host a civilization that connects continents, would you believe them? This is the story of how a people from one of the world's harshest landscapes built an empire that shaped history. Chapter 1. A beginning in the desert. Scene: a depiction of bustling Mecca, camels laden with goods entering the city, and a young Muhammad observing the world around him. Life in 6th century Arabia revolved around tribal loyalty, trade, and survival. Mecca was a vital trade hub with caravans carrying spices, textiles, and more. Yet despite the wealth flowing through its markets, much of Arabian society was fragmented. This was the world Muhammad was born into around 570 CE. Practical example. Think of Muhammad's life as a roadmap for finding purpose in adversity. Orphaned at a young age, he could have been consumed by despair. Instead, he became a trusted merchant known for his honesty, a quality so rare that it earned him the nickname Al-Amin, the trustworthy. His story reminds us that character can shape destiny, even in challenging environments. Scene shifts to a depiction of the first revelations in the cave of Hira. Muhammad's spiritual journey began in solitude, meditating in the mountains. It was here, according to Islamic tradition, that the angel Gabriel delivered the first verses of the Quran. Imagine receiving a message so profound it could change the course of history, yet facing immediate ridicule for sharing it. This teaches us the power of perseverance in the face of rejection. Chapter 2. Building a community. Scene: a depiction of the Hijra, Muhammad and his followers traveling to Medina. In 622, Muhammad and his followers left Mecca, seeking refuge in Medina. This migration, the Hijra, wasn't just about survival, it was the beginning of a new kind of society. In Medina, Muhammad forged a community built on shared faith rather than tribal ties. He negotiated peace between warring factions, created a constitution for the city, and laid the groundwork for the Muslim ummah, or community. Real-life advice. Think about your own life. Are there situations where old rivalries or divisions hold you back? Muhammad's leadership in Medina shows the importance of finding common ground and working toward shared goals. It's not about erasing differences but building something stronger together. Chapter 3. The Rashidun Caliphs, Expansion and Challenges. Scene: maps of rapid Muslim conquests spreading across Persia, the Levant, and North Africa. After Muhammad's death in 632, his followers faced a daunting question: who would lead this new community? The first 4 caliphs, known as the Rashidun, guided the early Muslim state through rapid expansion. Yet this period was far from harmonious. Internal disputes over leadership and questions of succession led to assassinations and divisions that persist today. Practical example. The story of the Rashidun Caliphs reminds us that leadership isn't about perfection, it's about navigating challenges. Abu Bakr, the first caliph, wasn't a military genius, but his steady hand united a fractured community. When you're in a leadership role, remember, it's not about solving every problem immediately. It's about keeping the ship afloat through the storm. Chapter 4. The Umayyads, Builders of Empire. Scene: the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and maps showing the extent of the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyads transformed the Caliphate into one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Spain to Central Asia. They centralized administration in Damascus and invested in monumental architecture, like the Dome of the Rock. But their focus on Arab identity and their lavish lifestyles alienated many, particularly the Shia community. Real-life advice. While the Umayyads achieved incredible feats, their downfall came from ignoring the grievances of the people they ruled. Whether you're managing a team or leading a project, remember, success isn't just about reaching new heights. It's about keeping the foundation strong. Chapter 5. The Abbasid Golden Age, a flourishing of knowledge. Scene: Baghdad's House of Wisdom, scholars translating texts and astronomical instruments in use. The Abbasids brought a new vision to the caliphate. They moved the capital to Baghdad, which became the center of a cultural renaissance. Scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic, creating a vast reservoir of knowledge. Medicine, astronomy, and mathematics flourished, influencing Europe's later Renaissance. Practical example. Consider how the Abbasids embraced knowledge from every corner of the world. It's a reminder that innovation often comes from collaboration. In your own work or studies, don't shy away from learning from others, even those with different perspectives or backgrounds. Chapter 6. Crusades, Mongols, and Resilience. Scene: Saladin retaking Jerusalem, Mongols sacking Baghdad, and Mamluks defeating the Mongols at Ain Jalut. The Crusades and Mongol invasions tested the resilience of the Islamic world. Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem in 1187 became a defining moment of unity and resistance. But the Mongol sack of Baghdad in 1258 dealt a devastating blow. Still, the Islamic world adapted. The Mamluks of Egypt halted the Mongols, preserving Islamic culture and power. Real-life advice. History shows that every civilization, like every person, faces setbacks. What defines them isn't the fall, but how they rise afterward. When life feels overwhelming, remember the Mamluks at Ain Jalut, defying the odds and holding their ground. Conclusion: lessons from 1,000 years. Scene: a blend of ancient and modern imagery, medieval Islamic art transitioning into modern skylines in the Middle East. 1,000 years of Islamic history remind us of the power of vision, resilience, and adaptability. From a desert birthplace to a vast, interconnected civilization, the story of Islam is one of transformation. It teaches us to embrace change, learn from others, and find strength in unity. The challenges faced then resonate with the challenges we face today. So, how will you write your chapter in history? Closing scene. Fade out with a quote from the Quran or a famous Islamic scholar, overlaid on a golden sunset over the desert. In 1995, while the Islamic Middle East was politically fractured, Europe launched one of the most defining series of wars in history. The Crusades, a campaign led by the Catholic Church, sought to liberate holy sites from Muslim hands, framing a centuries-long conflict between two worlds, one Christian and one Muslim. The Crusaders' presence in the Middle East would last for 200 years, dramatically shaping the region. But as these foreign invaders made their mark, they were met by one of the most remarkable figures in history, Saladin. Chapter 7. The Crusades, a clash of civilizations. Scene: European knights preparing for the Crusades, a fleet setting sail from Europe. The Crusades began with a religious zeal. The goal was to reclaim Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslims. European knights, hungry for adventure and religious glory, stormed the shores of the Mediterranean, conquering cities like Jerusalem and setting up crusader states. But for Muslims, these crusaders were viewed as invaders, as barbarians from a far less sophisticated world. Practical example. Imagine a neighbor who moves into your space claiming they are here to rescue it, even though you've lived there for centuries, with your own traditions and way of life. This was how many in the Middle East viewed the Crusaders, a threat to an established order. It wasn't just a military occupation, it was a clash of cultures. This tension would fuel centuries of conflict. Chapter 8. Saladin, a rising star in a divided world scene. Saladin leading his army, uniting a fractured Islamic world. In the 12th century, the Islamic world was a patchwork of rival factions, from the Fatimids in Egypt to the Seljuks in Anatolia. Amidst this fragmentation, a figure emerged whose leadership would shake the Crusaders to their core. Saladin, a Sunni Kurdish general, rose to power, unified the Muslim world, and founded the Ayyubid dynasty. His vision was clear: liberate Jerusalem and restore unity. Real-life advice. Saladin wasn't just a military strategist, he embodied the idea of leadership through unity. His rise teaches us that when faced with division, It's not always about brute force, it's about vision. Whether you're managing a team or building a community, the power of uniting people behind a common cause cannot be overstated. Scene: the Battle of Hattin, Saladin's forces overwhelming the Crusaders. In 1887, Saladin faced the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin and decisively defeated them. Jerusalem fell, marking a monumental moment. For Saladin, it was not just a victory, it was a triumph of patience, persistence, and leadership. Jerusalem was freed and the Crusaders' grip on the city was broken. However, this was not the end of the Crusader presence in the region. It would take another century before they were finally driven out. Chapter 9. The Mongol Invasion. A World Unraveled. Scene: vast Mongol hordes sweeping across the Asian steppes, led by Genghis Khan. Meanwhile, in the Far East, a different force was rising. Genghis Khan, born in the Mongolian steppes, united a fractured nomadic world into the largest contiguous empire in history. His military tactics were unmatched, and his ruthlessness would leave an indelible mark on the Islamic world. Practical example. Picture the Mongols as a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, and unforgiving. But Genghis Khan wasn't just a conqueror. His empire transformed the world's trade networks and even led to the spread of ideas across the Silk Road. But for the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongols were a nightmare. After the Khwarezmian rulers executed Mongol merchants, the Mongols exacted a brutal revenge, wiping out the empire in a bloodbath that ended its reign. Scene: Hulagu Khan's invasion of Baghdad. In 1258, Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, turned his attention to Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world. The Abbasid Caliph refused to surrender, and in response, Hulagu besieged the city. Baghdad was razed to the ground, its inhabitants massacred, and its great library, the House of Wisdom, destroyed. This marked the end of the Islamic Golden Age, and the Abbasid Caliphate that had ruled for 500 years was no more. Chapter 10. The Mamluks. From slaves to saviors. Scene: Mamluks in battle, their distinct armor shining as they faced the Mongol threat. Yet the story of the Islamic world wasn't over. In Egypt, a new power emerged. The Mamluks, former slave soldiers who had been brought from the steppes, converted to Islam and trained in the art of war. By 1260, the Mamluks faced the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut. Against all odds, they defeated the Mongols, halting their advance into Egypt. Real-life advice. The Mamluks were once slaves, yet through strength, loyalty, and strategy, they became masters. Their story teaches us that no matter where you start, you can always rise. It's a testament to the power of resilience, training, and seizing opportunities when they present themselves. Scene: Mamluks conquering Crusader territories. The Mamluks didn't just halt the Mongol invasion, they also drove the Crusaders from the region, sealing the end of the Crusader states. Their victory symbolized a shift in the region's power dynamic, and they became the new protectors of Islam. Chapter 11. The Rise of New Empires, Ilkhanids, Timurids, and the Ottoman Scene. Maps showing the rise of the Ilkhanid, Timurid, and Ottoman empires. After the fall of the Ilkhanid dynasty, which had embraced Islam and contributed to cultural prosperity, the Timurids emerged. Led by Timur, also known as Tamerlane, this empire showcased a brutal yet culturally vibrant reign, leaving its own mark on the region. Timur's empire spanned from India to the Middle East, continuing the legacy of conquest and cultural fusion. Practical example. Timur's empire is a stark reminder that brutality and beauty can coexist. While his conquests were marked by immense bloodshed, his reign also saw the flourishing of arts, architecture, and intellectual life. Scene: Osman and the rise of the Ottoman Empire. Meanwhile, in Anatolia, a new power was emerging. Around 1300, Osman, a leader of a small Turkic principality, began a campaign of territorial conquest that would eventually lead to the formation of the Ottoman Empire. Over the next several centuries, the Ottomans would rise to dominate the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Europe. Real-life advice. The rise of the Ottomans reminds us of the power of perseverance. Starting as a small principality, they weathered the storms of history, embracing innovation and adapting to change. Osman's success wasn't just about the battlefield, it was about adaptability and vision. Chapter 12. The Ottoman Legacy. A final caliphate scene. Ottoman armies marching, Constantinople falling, and the grandeur of the Ottoman Empire. In 1453, the Ottomans dealt a fatal blow to the Byzantine Empire by conquering Constantinople. The city was renamed Istanbul, and the Ottomans had a new capital at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. The Ottomans continued to expand, making use of gunpowder weapons and naval power. And by the 16th century, they stood as one of the mightiest empires the world had ever seen. Conclusion: a long legacy. The Ottoman Empire would last for 600 years, surviving through wars, revolutions, and social upheaval, until its eventual collapse after World War I. But the legacy of the Islamic empires, from Saladin to the Ottomans, endures to this day. The story of these civilizations isn't just one of conquest, it's about resilience, innovation, and the constant battle to adapt to a changing world. Closing scene. Fade out with a quote from a renowned Ottoman scholar, juxtaposed with a panoramic view of Istanbul today.